I've used a lot of meal services, but Hungry Root truly stands out because it's built around the way real families live and eat. They don't just send meal kits. They personalize your grocery cart and meal plan based on your preferences and dietary goals. All I had to do was take a short quiz, and right away, their smart cart technology started building a cart that fit how we eat. Now, each week feels easier, like someone else is doing the thinking for me. I've been focused on cleaner eating lately, and I love that Hungry Root keeps out over 200 additives, including things like high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. Their meats are hormone and antibiotic free, and the produce options include organic and non GMO picks. They also stock brands I already trust, like Oatly, Vital Farms, and Harmless Harvest. One of our favorite meals has been the teriyaki salmon with green beans, light, flavorful, and done in 12 minutes flat. Plus, I've noticed we waste less food, spend less time shopping, and even save money by skipping those impulse grocery buys. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg and use code Dr. Meg. That's hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg.
This is Parenting Great Kids with Dr. Meg Meeker.
Who am I? Where do I belong? These are questions we begin contemplating from early childhood, and it's no surprise that nurturing a positive sense of self is essential for a child's social and emotional development. But what if this journey of self-discovery is disrupted or challenged? Well, today we're joined by Julie Ryan McGue, a writer, domestic adoptee, and identical twin. In her work, Julie shares insights on navigating the complexities of identity, belonging, and finding meaning in it all.
Oh, thanks for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
In Twice a Daughter, you explore your search for identity and belonging. How did your experience as a twin and adoptee influence your understanding of these concepts?
I think one of the things that my parents did really well was tell my sister and I from I probably was 3 or 4 years old that we were adopted. Mm-hmm. So I understood the concept, that I had another set of parents. They could not parent my sister and I, and that these were my parents. I think because I am a twin, and I knew who I looked like, and I had this innate sense of belonging to her, the fact that we were put in the same situation together was a major blessing to both of us. My parents had infertility issues, and they were very good at telling us how much they wanted us, how much they loved us. We had little check-in conversations around our birthday every few years, just to kind of test where we were. Were we happy? Did we have any questions? It was a closed adoption, which means for the listeners, if they're not aware, there was no information given to my parents about my sisters and my background. And knowing that very early on, I kind of compartmentalized that, the fact that I couldn't know. But one of the things that happens with adoptees, and I've had plenty of conversations with fellow adoptees, is this fantasy life of who were these people. While we belonged certainly in this big Irish Catholic family that we were being raised in, we had a curiosity always about who they were and what the circumstances were. And my sister and I would talk about that in our bedroom, and came up with what we thought was the plan, and it could have turned out to be further from the truth.
Yeah. Did you think, as you were thinking back on what your birth parents were like, what your life would have been like if you had stayed with them? In other words, did you have an alternate Julie?
I'd say no, because I was so connected with this twin sister and
Mm-hmm.
we were each other's alter ego. That
Mm-hmm.
is different from most adoptees. I do have a brother 2 years younger than my sister and I, not biological brother, but adopted. And the three of us were a little bit of a pack. My parents had biological children after the three of us. Sometimes that happens. So
Mm-hmm.
they did a good job of not treating any of us differently, but we would have conversations amongst each other about what we thought might have happened or didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you had really good parents. I mean, adoptive parents who were very open with you, and having a closed adoption is hard. Do you think it would have been easier if it were an open adoption and you could have known more?
I think I like the idea of open adoption because I do think that adoptees benefit from that knowledge of what their circumstances were that led to them being placed with a different family. But for adoptive parents, that's a really tricky situation. You get into a co-parenting issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my parents did things their way.
Mm-hmm.
They were very strong Catholics. We had chores and allowances, and I'm not sure that there was room for my mother,
Mm.
particularly for another mother in the picture. And that's something that does come out in the book. I am faced with a health issue when I'm late 40s, and I decide, along with a lot of encouragement from my husband, to research what I could find out.
Mm-hmm.
At that time in the state of Illinois, the adoption laws were changing, and I had some access to some information that I wouldn't have had before that. So, and what happens in the story is I confront my mom and ask for my adoption papers, and she's not happy with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to go back to your original question, I don't think that there was room in our relationship for another mother. It has taken her, today's her birthday, she's 91. And I think it's taken her most of her parental life to come
Mm-hmm.
to terms with that. And we can circle back to that. There's a cute conversation about that that happens later.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, when I read that, I was a little surprised, but that probably is her generation. I
It's
mean,
her.
that's what happened during adoption. You didn't even talk about, the biologic parents and so forth. You discuss the impact of adoption on different aspects of life, and how have your conversations about adoption helped other people navigate their own journeys of belonging, and regardless of their background?
One of the things that happened in the course of my adoption search and reunion was I got involved with a social worker from Catholic Charities who pulled me into an adoption support group. And in that triad, adoptive parents, birth parents, and fellow adoptees, we met quarterly. And that conversation between the three groups, there was a lot of sharing of perspectives. There is loss in absolutely every position in that triad. Adoptive parents most likely have been led to adoption because of infertility issues. For a birth parent, they lose the ability to raise their birth child. And then for adoptees, we lost our connection to our first family. So we shared about all of those struggles in our group. And I think listening to birth mothers talk about the pain that they felt about having to relinquish a child, and to some of them, they couldn't even recognize Mother's Day, much less the birthday of their child. A very
Mm-hmm.
painful situation. That support group was very helpful in my relationship with my birth mom, because she also did not want this situation, adoption search and reunion, to happen. So I had an adoptive mom who wasn't happy about it. And my birth mom was not happy about it. And this support group really was instrumental in getting me to understand everybody's position. And I think the conversations move forward because of that social worker's expertise.
Sounds complicated, on an emotional level, because you're right. You've got these three people with loss, and you're sort of in the middle of it all, not by choice. While we're talking about you explore the complexities of family ties. How do you think your relationships with your adoptive parents and your twin sister and your birth family contribute to your understanding of self and family dynamics? That's a loaded question. I know that's a loaded question.
It
but
is.
If you can pick it apart, that would be great.
I think I'll go back to a little story. When I was a teenager, my sister and I were on a sleepover in our own home for our birthday, and a friend from school, after we were playing Ouija board, she said, you guys are adopted, right? And we said, yeah. I mean, it wasn't a conversation that I had with my friends. It wasn't anything that anybody really talked about. It was hush hush. It was kind of a stigma, actually, for my parents more than me. And she said, well, do you know anything about your real parents? And that set off bells and whistles with me. My parents that were raising me, my adoptive parents, they were my real parents. And so this positive adoption language that we learn as we get older, my first family as my birth mother and my birth father, and my adoptive parents are my real parents. So this piece of identity, what I was forming at a very early age, was my sister and I and our parents were a family. Now, as I've gotten into the literature and conversation with folks, I think we can understand an adoptee and their two sets of parents because so much divorce in our society. This idea of a blended family, and so I think that I would say to parents now that have kids or their children's friends that might be adopted, this child has two sets of parents. The ones that are raising them, the ones that they belong to, but they also belong to this other set of parents because they are biologically related to them. I don't think it needs to be an either or. It can be both. And I think society today is ready to welcome that and understand that sense of belonging to both families.
But what does a child do? That whole idea of identity formation and the sense of belonging, who feels very attached to their adoptive parents, and yet they feel connected to their bio parents. How do you deal with it when your bio parents where you feel rejection from them? How do you navigate a relationship where you feel connected but rejected at the same time?
That's a tough one. It really is. And I felt it as an adult. My birth mother did reject my sister and I when we first reached out to her. She never saw it coming, so she didn't she wasn't prepared for it. I think the younger you are, when you're having to walk on that balance beam between adoptive parents and birth parents, it's tricky. And I'm grateful that there is so many social workers that have expertise in this area. And certainly I'm on the board of an adoption agency, and every summer we have a family event where these families, adoptees and their adoptive parents, they all get together in a social setting. So there's an exchange of information, but also kids look around and say, oh, I'm just like these kids. They have adoptive parents, and this child is dealing with what I'm dealing with, the sense of self and identity. Where do I belong? I didn't have access to that, but I had a twin sister. and I had a brother that was adopted, and we were kind of dealing with that on our own. We felt like we belonged, and that was our family. I think it's a really tricky thing, and each kid is different. I'm glad that I didn't have too many issues with it until I was old enough, based on life experiences, to kind of deal with that rejection. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's the secondary rejection. The first rejection is called the primal wound, which is adoption itself.
I'm thinking about, and this was your family situation as well. There are a number of adoptees who also live with the biologic children of their adoptive parents.
Hmm?
So, were there any specific struggles that you had with your identity and comparing yourself to a biologic child, or was that a non-issue for you? And if so, what is the experience that you have seen of other kids who've grown up as adoptees in a family where there are also biologic siblings?
For me, it was not a big issue. I think because we were the oldest,
Mm-hmm.
my parents and my sister and brother and I had a very established a little hierarchy. Um, my youngest sister is 9 years younger than me. So there's, the whole birth order thing. And if anything, because my sister and I are twins, we were kind of set apart anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Which was
Did you get
interesting.
along with her?
My twin? Oh yeah.
No. You're the 9-year-old, your younger sister.
Yes, but we were almost too far apart in age to
Mm-hmm.
have much of a relationship. She certainly looks up to my sister and I still, and we take care of her as much as we can, um, emotionally, for whatever she's dealing with. I'm very close to my brothers and sisters that are younger, that are my parents' biological kids. Um, Now, your other piece of your question, I do have friends, adoptee friends, that are the only adoptee in their family,
Right.
and that there are biological kids. Um, and their experience was that the adoptive parents worked extra hard
Mm-hmm.
at making sure there was no preference, making accommodations. And the family I'm thinking of in particular transferred her to a different school. She had different needs than the biological kids did. She when my friend went through adoption search and reunion, she went to those meetings with her. So there was definitely some sweat equity in the relationship, and I think that that's a wonderful thing. It's not always the case.
A lot of parents, adoptive parents, may not want to do that. I'm thinking, often you'll see a set of biologic children, two or so, and then they have an adoptive child from a different race or a different country.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play into stresses or identity issues that the adoptive child may have? Or does it? Does it matter?
There's several really good books about that. Nicole Chung wrote a book, All I Can Ever Know, and she is, I think, an Asian adoptee living in Washington State in a very white community. And she has a good relationship with her parents, but she is not immersed in the culture that her birth parents would have exposed her to. And so there is some issues with that. I think that that's a very tough road to walk. And I think the adoptive parents have to make a concerted effort to introduce an international adoptee to the culture from which they come.
Some days, parenting feels like chasing moments that never quite land. You ask a question, they shrug. You try again, they look at their screen. And you wonder, why is this so hard? That's why I love FamGabs. It's a 70-card deck created by a child therapist who spent 16 years working directly with families, helping parents and kids break through the awkward one-word answers and really connect. The questions are open-ended, thoughtfully chosen, and designed to get your child talking and keep the conversation going. There are even bonus cards just for parents to help you build your confidence in your connection toolbox. If you've ever wished for a better way to understand your child or just to have more meaningful conversations as a family, FamGabs is such a gift. Search FamGabs on Amazon and use promo code Dr. Meg Pod during checkout to get 10% off your order. That's FAMGABS on Amazon. Use promo code Dr. Meg Pod and get 10% off your order. I've had so many parents say, Dr. Meg, my child is bright, but they're struggling in school and I don't know what to do. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And that's why I'm excited to share K-12 powered schools with you. K-12 offers tuition-free, accredited online public education for grades K through 12. These programs let kids learn at their own pace with built-in flexibility that supports different learning styles and family needs. And unlike homeschooling, K-12 provides certified teachers who guide your child's education online. The lessons are engaging, the technology is hands-on, and your child gets real opportunities to connect with clubs, extracurriculars, and even in-person events. As a mom, a grandmother, and a pediatrician, I know how powerful it is when education meets your child's needs instead of the other way around. So if you're looking for something different, something better, go to k12.com/Dr. Meg and find a tuition-free K-12 powered school near you. That's k12.com/DRMEG, all caps.
Now, this is probably a real touchy question, and a lot of parents may not like it, but I'll ask it anyway because I know they're thinking about it. If you're a parent and you want to adopt children and you're a Caucasian family, does it matter, where you adopt your children from? Or are you making life harder for an adoptive child if it comes from one country or another country or one race or another? Or is life easier for child if you adopt a Caucasian child? Does it matter or does it not matter?
I think society gratefully has moved past what happened when I was an adoptee. We didn't stick out. We looked like our adoptive parents, and certainly we looked like our birth parents once I finally met them. But society isn't stuck in that you look different and so you don't belong. I think that adoptees nowadays, whether they're a different race or a different nationality, they can fit in because it is much more widely done.
Mm-hmm. Do kids from a different culture have a longing to understand their original culture? Because cultures are all different. And sometimes I know kids can struggle with wanting to know, what was that culture like? And what would my life have been like if I would have stayed in that culture? Say, they're born in South America and now they're living in North America with a very different lifestyle. Is that ever an issue, or do they have difficulty processing it, or is it a non-issue for the child?
I think it's a very big issue. I've read a couple books about Asian sisters. One was kept by the family. The other was adopted and brought to the United States. They do connect eventually and become very close, but they have vastly different experiences. And the one that is adopted into the U.S., she's from an affluent family. She's exposed to education. And maybe not so much about her culture. Whereas the sister, raised in the culture, but maybe not the same advantages as the other sister, they do end up, this particular family, they do end up connecting and kind of going back and forth, sharing experiences and educating each other. So I think it is a tough road to be placed outside of your culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's just important to talk about, because I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there who are listening who were adoptees or who have adopted children. And from what I've experienced, parents who adopt children want to do the very, very best that they can for their children. And they want to understand what struggles they may have or that they may not have. And sometimes it's hard for them to know, and to sort of help them navigate that. In your book, you go into your personal journey, and you alluded to the fact that you, when you were older and you had some health issues, that you sort of began this journey of tracking down your health history. Could you just quickly kind of talk to us about your personal journey and how that changed you, and how that changed your perception of family and identity?
Yes. I think some things that happen to adoptees is we pigeonhole our adoption, and there's adoptees that are late discovery. They don't even know they're adopted, and then they find out, and that's a whole nother identity issue. But for me, I figured I couldn't know. So I didn't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to worry about it because I had this breast biopsy, and I needed to know if I had breast cancer in my birth families.
Mm-hmm.
I was late in figuring out personally that I needed to know that I wanted to know that I was owed that. And that really is at the crux of this whole conversation, is where is our right to know versus the right to privacy. And it's still being battled in so many states, which is why adoption records are still sealed in like 30 states. People like me at my age don't have access to their original birth records. And that, I think, is a big affront to adoptees. The fact that we can become a certain age, middle-aged people, and still not have access to information that concerns us. We all should be able to know everything that concerns us, especially when it comes to identity. So where that, that balancing mark is between right to know versus right to privacy is a tough conversation. And I think that conversation is being waged all the time on platforms, on Facebook. There's plenty of groups that people can join and listen to experts on both sides of that issue. I think the access to the conversation is vastly improved from when I was a child. And even in the last 15 years, there's a lot more books that parents can avail themselves of to see what is maybe inside their adopted child's head. What are they thinking about? Do they have the fantasies that my sister and I had? Probably. Do they wonder what happened to their parents? And it does affect our sense of self to know that somebody didn't keep us, wasn't able to raise us. It's always a tough thing to know you're right off the bat a little bit behind in developing your self-worth.
So I assume you advocate for open book, for kids to be able to have all the information about biologic parents as they're young. Is there any situation where it can be harmful, where adoptive parents should sort of slowly reveal some of that information to their kids, or is there a certain age, or does it not matter?
Well, in open adoption, there should be a plan that's set up from the very beginning between the adoptive parents and the birth parents. Whether both sides follow that plan. Let's say every year on their birthday, they're supposed to get a letter, and in exchange, pictures are supposed to be sent. That's the agreement between both sets of parents. Whether that happens or not is up to those people. But I think that expectation for the child that that's going to happen can be a real big problem if it doesn't happen. And adoptive parents can decide to pass on the information or not. Certainly, once a child reaches 18 years of age, they should be able to make a choice for themselves what kind of information they want, what kind of relationship they want or don't want, whether they're capable of emotionally handling the rejection, the sense of identity that they may or may not get is a good question. And that's where good counseling comes in.
So as you counsel parents of adoptive kids, what is your recommendation to them if they have the ability to give their kids as much information as they want in general? And I know all kids are very different, but what is your recommendation as far as divulging information along the way at certain ages? Is there, because I imagine some kids are going to feel rejected right off the bat, but some kids may not. So is there a general rule about what's healthy for kids and what isn't? Because I know there are a lot of mothers out there, maybe dads saying, okay, my child is 10 and they're adopted and they don't know a whole lot about their bio parents. What should I say? What do you tell that parent?
I think you tell them, you know your child best. You know where they are emotionally, whether they're mature or not mature. The child should express some kind of interest if the conversation is brought up or not. I don't need to know any of that, Mom. I'm very happy with where I'm at. That conversation needs to happen. Or there's a curiosity by one of the adoptees, and maybe in the family there's two, and one adoptee might say, I want to know and I want you to help me. The other one, and interestingly enough, there's a phenomenon with boys that they don't seem as curious about this as girls are. That was the case with my younger brother. He's like, nah, don't need to know any of this. Mom and dad are my mom and dad. So a parent needs to assess their child's emotional abilities and keep assessing it and keep asking questions. Are you sure you don't know? Have you had conversations in your classroom that make you uncomfortable? Are there kids that know you're adopted and they've said hurtful things? Maybe that's where the conversation really is helping your child figure out how to answer questions from their peers. Those have been very hurtful conversations for me and still are. Here's an example. I have an adult friend when I was going through this search for my birth parents, because I needed medical history. And I knew this woman very well. And she said to me, do you really think you should be doing this? Now that's another perspective. I was being viewed as being disloyal, even though I was. And so I think that is a big issue with all adoptees is we love our adoptive parents. Most of us have great experiences. And we want to be loyal to them. We want to show this loyalty by saying, I don't want to search right now, but maybe later I want to keep that door open. So it's a balancing act.
So fast forward, you're an adult, you're searching for your biologic information, parents and so forth, and you meet your mother. Did you meet your bio dad as well?
No, he passed away before he would agree to meet my sister and I.
Okay. And your mother was very gun shy, didn't want to do it. How have things settled out for you regarding or maybe they haven't changed at all regarding your identity as a woman and a daughter? Now that you know both, you've had relationships.
I view myself as having two mothers and two fathers. I am closer to my adoptive parents because I have a lifelong series of experiences and bonds with them. I do have a very unique relationship with my birth mother. I am ecstatic to have been able to find her, to know her. She's still alive. She's 91 also. The information she gave my sister and I has been, I think, full circle, a beautiful moment. There's complications with her, though. She was from that era where most birth mothers were unwed mothers. And so she had a lot of shame around that, a lot of self-blame for having gotten into a situation where my birth dad didn't marry her. And those pieces of identity for her, she internalized, and she's a very secretive lady. She has been reluctant to introduce us to some of my relatives. But I'll share an identity piece since we're talking about that. So I found out that both my birth parents were from Minnesota, and I have Native American in both sides of my family. And so I'm an adult now. I raised in an Irish Catholic family. I have taken on that whole piece of identity. And until I did my DNA analysis and it confirmed that I actually am Irish, I was really worried about that. But now I have this other piece of identity, this Native American identity, that I don't know what to do with.
Native American Irish Catholic.
Right. So I feel a little cheated that I didn't know that about myself. Would it have made a difference in growing up? I don't know. But here's the other piece of it, which is, kind of not fair. My birth mom's name on my birth certificate was an alias. That was something that was advised back in the closed adoption area. It protected her from ever being found if she didn't want to be found. But also, she didn't have to put my birth father's name on the birth certificate, which he never signed off on his parental rights, which...
Oh, he didn't?
No, that was...
Isn't that illegal?
It is now. It wasn't back then. And a lot of adoptions happened in that era. It's called the baby scoop era because there was so many of these kids. It was before birth control was legal, and certainly abortion wasn't even a safe option at all. Anyway, so his name isn't on my birth certificate. And I did some research, and because his name is not on my birth certificate, I cannot claim to be part of the Chippewa tribe. And I have enough in my DNA to be a member of the tribe if I wanted to be. But I can't. I'm prohibited because his name is on my birth certificate. So,
but as far as how you perceive your identity and what has shaped you, it doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't.
We only have a minute or two left, so let's talk to the parents out there who are considering adopting a child, and they want to do the very best thing for this child, of course, because they're seeking out a child, they're embracing this child. They're choosing this child. If you could give them one or two words of advice or encouragement, what would you say to them? Because a lot of times they're so anxious and worried and they feel like, I don't know what to do. What would you say to them as an adoptee?
Treat your child like they are your biological child and be honest with them. If they have a question, sit down and spend the time to answer it age appropriately, of course. I think that was one of the things that my parents did well and set us up for success as a family.
My guest has been Julie Ryan McGue, and her book is Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, family and belonging. It is a wonderful book. Whether you have been adopted, whether you're thinking about adoption, whether you have adopted a child, you need to read the book because there are a lot of complexities in there that you need to understand and know about and at least be able to use when you're raising a child with some complex identity issues. Julie, it has been so delightful meeting you and getting to hear your story. It is totally intriguing. I love to hear it. I have not adopted children myself, but I have a lot of friends and family who have. And so this is very, very insightful for me to help them and to at least get them to read your book. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Dr. Meeker. I think the conversation was very important, and I hope it helps other people.
I think it will. I know it will.